Hey everybody, and welcome here today. Can you actually do me a favor? Down in the printer are my slides. Can you get them for me? That's Allison, my wife. Thank you very much to Allison for helping me out today. She'll be answering questions. And also I want to say thank you to Austin Pomeroy, who helped me get all the audio set up today. So we're going to be working off of a few slides, and also I'll be talking to you as well. But I will email you all the slides. If you signed up and registered via the form, I'll send you the slides after. You don't have to take notes. As I said before, this webinar, I want to leave you with relatable and actionable advice. I fully expect that by the end of the day, you'll have some new strategy or some new content to put on. So let me just pull up the slides right now and get started. So I know a lot of people love agendas, so I want to share with you what we'll be going through today. So the first thing we're going to look at is, have we been in a situation like this before? Have we been in a place where there's been crisis that we've needed to do some communication? The second thing we'll look at is, what is the current research telling us about what's going on today? Then we're going to look at the 4 messages you need to be communicating. These are the 4 topics that you should be talking about. And then we're going to talk about how do we structure our messages. We're going to look at some examples, and then we're going to do some Q&A. So if you could check out the comment section and type in your questions. And I see we have some people from October Maury, that's Amy, and I know many of you because I work with you already. I'm so pleased and so honored that you would join us. Aaron and Linda from Variety Village, Amanda and Pat from the Yule clan, they're my mom and my sister. That's great, thank you so much. And other people that I don't know on here. So that's what we're gonna do today. The first thing I wanna look at is the Spanish flu. So this first part we're gonna look at is, what have we seen like this before? So when we look at the Spanish flu, here's what it did to our society. Here is the lasting impact of it. One, it brought about modern universal health care, not necessarily all over the world, but certainly in Canada, Britain, other parts of Western Europe, other parts of Eastern Europe, and that was one of the lasting impacts of the Spanish flu. It also brought about the end of World War I. All the countries realized they had a bigger enemy, and it was illness. And while it wasn't the sole factor, it definitely brought about global harmony in that respect. And then the other thing that was very interesting is it was really saw the most dramatic rise in unions in North America, because typically the poorest were being hit the hardest, and these were the people that were working in factories that didn't have protection. And after the Spanish flu, after 1918, et cetera, we saw a big rise in organized labor. The next crisis moment I want to talk to you about is 9/11. And we saw many of you will remember very distinctly pre-9/11 and post-9/11. The biggest impact we obviously saw was a permanent change to air travel. Do you remember being able to walk up to the gate with your loved ones or friends who are traveling, but just not being able to get on the plane? Now you can't even step near the security line without causing a problem. The other thing that happened was it really equalized world power. There's a great book called The World is Flat. I read around this time, and it talked about how 2 things, the dot-com boom and 9/11, really contributed to bringing China and India to be a superpower. It also brought the end to the 80s and 90s individualistic culture. You know, if you remember the 80s and 90s, we were pretty much all about me. Now, you might think we're about that today too, but ideally, we are actually much more about community. And the other thing it introduced to us was Islamophobia. So that didn't exist like it does today before 9/11. So what does that mean for today? What has COVID-19 brought some changes to our world? The first thing is supply chain transparency is so important to people now. They want to know, do you have the backfill to make whatever I need from you still ready? And I'm going to draw a comparison. I remember working with Toyota back when they had this problem, it must have been a decade about now, where their cars were allegedly accelerating without the person hitting the pedal. So this caused a huge PR crisis for them because they were known as the safety car, like they were the safest car on the road. Now, what their customers were telling them at this point wasn't, oh, I'm never going to buy from you again. It was, do you have the mechanism in place to fix this? Do you have the research facilities? Do you have the right people, the right connections? That was their supply chain. So we'll talk more about this, but I want you to start thinking about, what does your supply chain look like? The next one is, this is really reinforcing buying local. You don't have to look too far before you see people talking about like how when this is all over, I'm going to go to every local restaurant. I'm going to have a crazy vacation right here in my hometown. I am only going to buy from people I know, like I know and trust. So they may not know you personally, but they can get easy access to your information about who you are. Also, the value perceptions are really shifting. Like what we hold near and dear, you can see is just totally shifted. And I'm going to talk after these slides about what the current research is saying about how people are spending money and where they think they'll spend money afterwards. And that will be, I think you'll find some of that information helpful to you in your messaging. And finally, brand switching. People will switch brands. Loyalty has already been at a steady decline to brands. You're seeing huge loyalty shifts right now. If you are like our house, you would have felt the impact of this. EB Games opened up during the March break or something to let people buy Animal Crossing. Now I get it, like if you're EB Games, your bread and butter is selling video games and video games accessories. They received a huge backlash online and in the public because they were open in the middle of this pandemic. There was no social distancing. It looked really bad. And I've heard people say things like, I'm only going to buy from Amazon now. Where just 2 or 3 weeks ago, a month ago, people were saying, I'd never buy from Amazon. They treat their workers horrible. So you can see how that's a combination of both the value perception, whereas like I value more how you treat your employees than, or how you treat the public than how you treat the employees, et cetera, et cetera. So brand switching will happen. I'm sure you have products in your house today that you have bought because you could not get what you wanted to, and you might be loyal to that company moving forward. So just looking at some really quick data. This is some research done by a company called, I'm going to get it wrong, Luftif. And I love them. I read them every week because every week they put out data that's about 2 weeks lagging. So this data is from March 30th when it came out. And this is when people think the pandemic will be over. You see a third, 66% total, I guess, think between 1 and 6 months. So why is that important? Well, I'm going to show you in the next slide. Why it's important is it will help you plan for when you think people might start spending money again. And it may not be true, but for example, I was speaking, and she's on this webinar right now, speaking with an executive director of a nonprofit, and they wanted her to book a conference room for a meeting at the end of August, which you might think is or is not a good idea. However, you can see already people are thinking, oh, we'll be ready to do that. Now, I personally think you could probably phone up a conference center on August 15th to get a booking for August 16th, but people are already thinking that by August they'll be back to normal in terms of their spending. So, next slide, this timeline for virus starting to decline versus spending returning to normal. So you can see, even though people think, 36% of them think that in 1 to 3 months it will start to decline, only 21% thinks that they will be able to start spending money like they were before. And then it goes up to 26% at 3 to 6 months and 19% 6 to 9. This just gives you an idea. Basically, most people think, save the 23% that are 9 months to I could not predict. Most people think, over 75% of people think that within 9 months, they will be back to their normal spending habits. So for example, if you are in a big ticket item, if you sell something that's over $1,000 or are communicating for a product that's over $1,000, you need to be taking this into your consideration. How much time do I have before people are potentially ready to spend money with me again? And that will impact how you communicate. So here's, we're just going to have another slide or two on spending habits, because this will inform the rest of how we communicate. Here is from the same research group how people are changing their spending habits. So they're spending more, this should not be that surprising, on grocery and gourmet food. So almost half of us are spending money on grocery and gourmet foods. You know, we notice that here too, we don't eat out as much, so our grocery bills are way higher. However, we're eating different and more exciting things. So how can you use that knowledge in your communications? Health and personal care, 30%. And streaming internet services, 25%. You know, last night, do you do this? I was downstairs and Allison was upstairs, so I texted her because it was just easier. I can't be the only one that does that. And I said, hey, you know, Masterclass, because I'm sure you've seen the videos or the commercials, Masterclass is only $240 for 2 seats for a year. That's like $20 each a month. Like, I spend that on coffee in a week. And like I said to her, and look, like Serena Williams is a coach. And then I was like, I don't know if I'll ever be Serena Williams level tennis player. Like, I might actually exceed her, but I'm only kidding. But you know, we might spend money on that where I probably would not have even really entertained that thought before. And also what excites me is that I could do it, I could share that online streaming experience with my wife. We could each have a seat, we could watch videos and talk about it. Whereas before, a lot of what we're doing is online and streaming has been very singular. So, where people are spending the same, 82% are spending the same on their babies. Who are these 18% that have reduced their spending on their babies? Shame on you. No, I don't. That probably means they're spending more. But babies are getting the same amount of money. Pet supplies, we have not spent less on our furry friends. And music, which is so interesting. I remember being in a class like in 2008 with an executive from Sony Records, and he was just talking about the demise of his job. So I wonder what he's thinking now that we're still spending money on music and spending less, obviously, clothing. That will change. That's going to be a huge one. We're either going to need new clothes because we don't fit, both ways, or we're going to want to spend money to pamper ourselves. So clothing is less, automotive is down half, and then of course travel only down 44%. So I guess people are still, like those people that think the virus will be over in 3 months are probably still planning for travel. So here is just some, that's hard data. I wanted to share some anecdotal responses to this research as well too, because it will inform the next, one of the parts of the workshop today, how we take our, so I just saw a message from Candace Frigo, who is our realtor. She's amazing. She said she takes masterclass cooking classes. I actually have encouraged Candace to teach her own cooking classes because she's amazing. And I'll use her as an example, if you don't mind, Candace, later on how I think she could win by using some of that skill she has in her messaging. So anyhow, but here's some anecdotal data. I am most impressed with brands that are not trying to get me to continue to spend money or even spend more money by telling me how they are sanitizing their working conditions. What about the well-being of your workers? I want to support the brands that are taking care of their employees. I want their tone to be one of empathy and supportive. Ones that are looking to make changes to keep their brand in order to prevent the spread and keep their consumers and employees safe. These are 3 that I picked out from the many quotes they had in the research, because these 3, I would say, probably summed up 75% of what I was seeing in the data. So keep these at top of mind. Now, I want to be clear. We are not talking about the only messages and the only way you should be talking about. We're talking about the 4 ways that we should be talking. So as we go through this workshop, I just want to reiterate that. You can sell. You can make overtures to your customers and clients and audience base. However, you need to be doing the 4 things we're going to be talking about today, because it's what gives you permission to talk to them about selling and how your company's doing and moving on. You know, it feels like the world's shut down because you look out the window and you don't see anybody. You don't even see cars. However, so many of us are still working. I bet everyone on this workshop today doesn't take a day where they don't think about their job or their work. So we'll move on. Okay, so the 4 types of messages you should be pushing out regularly. And I think I said in one of the emails that we would talk about how often. I'm recommending to my clients right now, to your regular customers, your email database once a week. To your employees, maybe daily. Definitely once a week for them as well. Depending on how your organization is moving forward, you may want to be communicating to them every day. You know, one of the clients I get the opportunity to work with has a regular Wednesday meeting, and they also have daily meetings departmentally. And even if the meeting is to say, hey, no new news today, it's actually, I was talking to somebody from a department that I work with, and they said they appreciate that meeting even if there's no news, because they don't go home wondering. Okay, so here are the 4 types of conversations you'll be having today. First, supply chain management. And this is so important. Let me just get my sheet back here. So supply chain management, I'm going to show an example of what this looks like later on in the webinar. But the question I have for you is, what does supply chain management mean to you? What does it look like to be transparent in that supply chain management? So obviously, I'm going to use an example, a grocery store example later on. Obviously for them, it means that they want to be communicating that their warehousing is good, that their transportation is still fine, that their employees are coming to work and delivering food. However, it might mean to a nonprofit that we still have good funding, we're still able to serve our constituency, we will open up the very day we are told it is safe to, because here are the things behind the scenes that are allowing the operations to be on solid ground. You want to be communicating that. So for example, one of the clients I'm working with, one of the messages that they're putting out this week is around training of new staff, because they have a big season coming up and they have already begun training. And the quality of the people that work for this organization is an important piece to the customers. So their supply chain message is all about training is still going on. Here's how we're doing it. It is almost like exposing trade secrets, how they're doing their training, because their competitors could see it and do the same. But you know what? Consumers appreciate that because they would prefer. It's like Volvo's philosophy has always been to share freely the patents on safety enhancements. So for example, seatbelts was a Volvo invention. They made the patent freely available for all automakers. Now is the time you can benefit from a similar philosophy. Is it communicating how you are well funded? We talked about that. And is it how you are continuing research or training? I'm going to go back because I know there's a few realtors on this. If you're a realtor, one of the things I'd want to be hearing from you is that you're still working with all the partners you have, your mortgage broker, your office staff, to keep on top of like bank changes and keeping on top of the research you do and following up on condo prices. One of the things that, what I'd love to hear from a realtor right now is their take on what's happening with Airbnb. There's a building downtown here in Toronto where like 19 apartments that were Airbnbs just came back on the market. How will that impact rent? I've read some great articles on potentially softening real estate prices because as companies see that working from home is a possibility, it might relieve the pressure on living downtown where all the companies are located. Now, that's not the purpose of this. I could talk about that for an hour as well, but that's just, if you're a realtor, those are the things you should be thinking about. Feel free, send me an email. I'd be happy to discuss your particular piece. There's 20 of us on this, so I'd be happy to talk with you individually about this as well. How are you caring for employees? This is also key. You want to communicate, are they working from home? Are they still coming in? What have you provided for them? How are you caring? And this is key. How are you caring for their mental health? Mental health, I believe, will replace the environment as the issue for the next 5 years. It will take the podium spot away. We will not be talking about Kyoto Accords, and fracking. We will be talking about how are we caring for our public and mental health. You should start having that conversation with your audience right now. Are you calling your employees every day? What have you how have you shifted the benefits they can receive? If you laid them off, how are you communicating to them what you're doing to get them back as soon as possible? You know, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Patagonia. They are an amazing outdoor clothing brand. I personally don't own any of their, well, I think I was given one of their jackets that's branded by a company, but I haven't bought anything. It's not my thing in particular, but I'm a fan, and I actually subscribe to their email because when they received a $10 million tax credit from the federal government in the United States, that was the government canceled some environmental tax that had been going on, and Patagonia benefited by $10 million. They gave that $10 million to the very organizations that had fought the repeal of this environmental law that protected things. I became a fan of them, not because I'm an environmentalist, but because I love organizations that are willing to stick to their values. If you follow the UFC right now, they're supposed to have a fight in California. They're looking at a few different things. They are looking at having it on First Nations lands, and they're also looking at having their fight on an island. And I just think it's a horrible move on their part. Like, more people are going to dislike that they're putting people in harm's way than will like the fact they get to watch a fight. You know, so how are you taking care of your employees? What does pulling back the curtain look like for you? How do you reveal a little bit of your inner workings? People don't buy from companies they like, they buy them from companies they trust. How do you build that trust? And next, how are you being helpful? And so I'm going to talk about the Kansas example right now. There's a few ways you can be helpful. Some companies are just saying, hey, anything you buy from me right now, 50% is going towards local healthcare workers to buy masks or whatnot. That's one way. It's great. I'm not a huge fan of that blanket, like donate to charity. It's not as personal as it could be. But there's a great book by Jason Fried, and I'm blanking on the name right now, but basically he is the founder, CEO of, I'm 0 for 2. Allison, you do a Google for me, Jason Fried. Thank you. Or if anybody else knows him on the chat, he is the founder of a project management software. Anyhow, he started a few companies, and he wrote this book. And the topic of the book was how to start a company, because he realized that by starting so many companies, he became an expert in starting companies. So my question to you is, what are you doing? What have you become an expert in because of what you do that you could share? So for example, I know there's some of my friends from Variety Village on here. You guys have become experts in event management. I know the communications department there does a lot of events. What could you share right now, tips for doing events on a budget, for example? Planning your wedding, more low-key than you had originally thought because you want to get married this summer and it probably won't happen at the size you wanted. One of the clients, we're having one of the directors of the company, his kids made a rocket ship out of some cardboard boxes. We did a how-to make the same rocket ship. If you are an insurance company, what can you do around your house now that might help you get a lower premium in the future because you can make some improvements? Things like that. And what would be meaningful for you? So I said, Candace, I said, listen, people love kitchens, right? Like, I love kitchens. I can't cook for anything. But I suggested, Candace, like, show off your cooking, teach people how to cook. I actually love watching cooking shows. I just don't do any of it, but I love it, and I would watch content like that. The next thing, what the new normal will look like. You want to communicate to your clients and audience what the new normal will be for your company. And they'll want to know things very specific, like what does your new health and safety protocols look like? What will you be doing to get better going forward? How are you readying yourself to thrive out of this? A lot of companies I'm seeing right now are just talking about how they're surviving. And you can see it. I know I decided not to call out any companies on this. Well, I called out EB Games, but that was in the newspapers. But I'm not going to call out any of my personal opinion on this one. But I'm sure you see it. Are you like me? Did you get an email from every company you've ever seemed like you visited their website when the COVID virus hit and they talked about how they're being safe? Well, I quickly began just junk mailing those and unsubscribing because honestly, it was not inspiring. But the ones that I've kept, and I'm going to talk to you about Metro, the grocery store. I don't regularly shop there, but I'm a fan of Metro now because their emails rock. Their communications are amazing. They've really explained how they're going to be successful going forward. It gives me confidence to start being their customer right now. So we've talked about the 4 topics: supply chain, transparency, how are you caring for your employees, how are you going to be helpful during this time, and what the new normal looks like. Now, those are the 4 messages that you need to be communicating right now. If you do these 4 well, you will be given permission to do the kind of sales and marketing that you typically have done. Now, when I say typically, I don't mean the exact same messaging, but you can still ask people to buy from you if you are doing these 4 messages. Another company, I don't have them in as an example here. I like to woodwork. I don't often get the chance to, but I'm a big fan of Lee Valley. If you're in Canada or in the States, you can look them up. They're very cool. Their first 2 weeks of COVID was just these messages. And I actually haven't seen a message like this from them since. Now, I would recommend they should put another one out soon. But since then, they've been sending me gardening emails and buy this product now for your garden, and here's new products that we have in inventory. And I just really love that. So I just saw Gita? Is it a hard G or a soft G? Tell me. Hello, I trust you and your family, loved ones are keeping safe and well. Thank you. We are. So we'll move on. We're going to talk about how you do this. If you've done a communications workshop with me, this is pretty much the one message I come with. And I'm going to talk to you about using empathy and authority. In the email, I described it as caring and leadership, or showing empathy and leading, but really it breaks down into using empathy and authority. And I'll throw the slides back up to do that now. So, using empathy and authority to structure our messages. So, empathy is this. It's things like, we are in this together, we are also at home, times are uncertain, so we are doing our best to bring clarity, and here's how we are coping. I won't go into the whole spiel because I want to make sure we leave time for questions, but I like to use the example of Luke Skywalker and Yoda. So when Luke Skywalker met Yoda, the main reason, and this is in Star Wars, for those of you who have not seen them, that's the characters I'm talking about. The main reason those two came together was Yoda was the guide. Now in this scenario, you are the guide, right? Luke Skywalker, the hero, is your customer. And that's how I want you to frame your messages as well. But when they came together, the message from Yoda was, I've been through this before. I've also fought the Empire. I know what it's like to feel like you're alone. I know what it's like to have a lot of unanswered questions. Yoda was a great guide because before he did anything else, he showed empathy. And all of your scripts, all of your stories can follow the same idea from that screenplay. So I'll move on to authority. Authority looks like this. We've always had a robust health and safety policy. We're meeting regularly with smart people to help us help you. We are on top of the situation. Here's how. So authority would be things like, I've been doing this for 50 years. I've been through other crises. I've learned from the past. Here's what we're doing now. Now, the authority that Yoda brought to Luke Skywalker was this: I'm a 900-year-old Jedi. I have actually fought the very person you are going to fight. In fact, I knew them and trained them. That was the authority he brought. But here's the balance. And I have a Star Wars graphic. I'm so proud of myself. You don't want to be like Anakin. He was supposed to bring balance to the Force. You want to be like Luke Skywalker by bringing balance to these two messages. If you bring too much of an empathy message, like those emails I've already archived or junk mailed or unsubscribed, I felt they were too weak. They did not inspire confidence in me. They were also scared. I don't want to be scared of the company. I want them to inspire me, to empower me. And I've also junked the ones that came across with too much bravado, that were like, oh, we know the answer. Like EB Games. They thought they were better and knew better. No, I want you to respect the authorities I respect. So you need to find a real balance between empathy and authority. So I'll move on to a couple of examples. Again, I've mentioned them a few times. This is Metro, and man, like honestly, they have been my favorite. I kind of wish they were more exciting than a grocery store to me. Like grocery stores can be very exciting. I'm not saying they're not, but for me personally, I wish they were more exciting. My dog is sleeping. He's having a dream right now. It's so cute. I think he's having a bad dream actually, but anyhow, nonetheless. So it's okay, Boomer. It's okay, buddy. So Metro, I wish they did something that was more exciting to me, like they sold, I don't know, go-karts or like basketball or something. But I love this email. This is just the top one. You see, they talk about their supply chain and then they go right on to everyone's health and safety are always at the heart of our decisions. Now, they came out with this email before anybody else. They had that first to market advantage here, but it is a great lesson. So I'm going to send you these slides. You can look at it in more detail, but go subscribe to Metro's email right now if you haven't. It is basically a masterclass in these. They capture all 4 messages that I've talked about. Go subscribe to their email list. I don't even know how I got on it, to be honest. Probably through an Air Miles thing, I imagine. But I'm happy I'm on it. The next one is Ally Financial, and they're basically out of the States. But they came out on day one, more or less, with a great message about how they are taking care of their employees. Now, they're out of the States, so it's a bit different. They have messages like free virtual doctor's visits. Now, as an aside, I'm not sure if you're aware, a company called Maple in Canada. You can actually visit doctors online and pay $45, but you get to see the doctor in like 10 minutes as opposed to booking weeks in advance. So same idea. But they came out, and this was one of the first messages that they had when they closed their branches. They said, here's what we're doing for our employees. They have, we're supporting them this way. Here's how we communicate and contact them. Again, I'll send you these slides so you can see it and read up close. So, so this Metro email is a great example of supply chain management transparency. This Ally Financial is a great example of how you will care for your employees. And this next one, Host, I love this one. This is again out of the States. This is a service where you can hire professional bartending services. So what they're doing is they're putting out cocktail recipes every day. Typically they don't do this, but it just makes so much sense. I used to work at Centennial College in the Athletic and Wellness Center, and it's just a couple of students who work there. They took it upon themselves. They're putting out at-home workouts that you can do with stuff around your house. Like I think they did one with textbooks even recently, which was brilliant given that they have this student population. But what can you do that's just on the other side of your business that you can start sharing that is helpful to your client base? Like, so for example, if you are like a craft store, you may not want to do something about like car mechanics. It's just too far removed. Unless, of course, there's some symbiotic relationship there. And finally, this is one from Muskoka Woods. They're a summer camp, and this is what they, this is a great email I thought they did that talked about what the new normal will look like. And this is about their healthcare committee. And the email goes on, it's not the entire email on this slide, but it talks about all the professionals who have always been on their healthcare committee and are now creating new policies and protocols. So they've really painted a picture of how summer camp will be safe, because if you have children, or if you've had children, or if you have to plan summertime for young people, you know that's a concern. But you're not going to send them, like you probably already have in your head, places you probably won't send your kids again because you weren't really sure about how awesome they were in the first place. Now you're really not going to send them because you're going to be worried about health and safety things. So how are you going to plan for the future? How are you going to go forward? So last but not least, we have questions. So I'll give you a few minutes. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. We're at 39 minutes. If you have to go, that's fine. But I'd love to spend the next 15 minutes just talking about real world problems. And while I'm waiting for your questions to come in, you can just send them into the chat. I will do the only bit of promotion, and that is I do a daily 2-minute podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, all the places you might get a podcast. It's called the Leading with Nice Daily. It's just 2 minutes long. And I talk about topics like this and just give high-level pieces and then point to other places where you get more information. So for example, this week, I'm actually doing crisis and communications. And I've done everything. I've done a lot of topics. I'm coming up on episode 70. And for episode 100, I'm going to be giving away Amazon Echo devices, because the Leading with Nice Daily is also available on Amazon Echo through their flash briefings. So if you have an Echo device at home, on my website, there's a link to enable the Leading with Nice Daily as part of your flash briefing. Flash briefings are like daily headlines. They're, again, very short. I personally have one from the CBC, and of course, the Leading with Nice Daily. But that's that. So I'd love to hear any questions you have about, about what we talked about today. And I haven't seen any yet. So, okay, Boomer. Yes, we have that. Sorry, in the chat, you probably see Linda. Okay, Boomer. Our dog's name is Boomer. I'm going to take that as the first question. Our dog is named Boomer, and that is because when we got him, we had young children, and they played a video game called Skylanders, and one of their favorite characters was named Boomer. And that's what he got named, because the second place choice was Cutie. And I think both Allison and I agreed we're not naming our dog Cutie. We might go back on that. Okay. So, do you see anything coming in, Allison? I don't. On one hand, this makes me feel great because I have so thoroughly explained this that you have no questions. But on the other hand, I'm wondering if I can just give you a few starters. So let's talk about, let me just scroll through the list here and see where we are. So for example, I see a couple of people I know who work in the insurance industry. The first thing I would do is I would send an email out to your audience about how you are educating yourselves about how this may impact the insurance market. So for example, I know, and I know because I've spoken with the principal at this insurance company many times. Oftentimes when I ask him about something, he will say to me, I was just speaking to a person from this company. Amy said she asked a question, but I don't see it here. I would send out that email to say, we are in regular contact with insurance companies about how this may impact the insurance market going forward. And potentially talk about, for example, and the other thing is, hey, we're in this kind of crisis. What about a weather crisis? What about a storm? Here are things you might want to consider in your insurance policy, because insurance policies often aren't widely understood. So I'm not getting the questions in there. Are you seeing them?
No.
Huh. Let me see. let's see. Yeah, I don't know. So, Amy, you can text away your question again, actually, I guess. If you are, let me see. If you, I know there's somebody in here who works at a private school, I would want to know, what are you doing to make your school healthy? So when students come back, most likely in September, okay. I'll get to this. How would you recommend communicating with volunteers versus employees? Great question. But to finish this one, private school. I want to know how many hand sanitation things have you installed? Where are they? Are they outside every classroom? What are you doing for food service? Are you having hand sanitizer outside? Will you have somebody there dispensing the hand sanitizer into each student's hands before they eat lunch, for example? People who care for children, those parents will be really concerned about how you manage their child's hygiene when they're in your care. So you want to start communicating that right away. So back to Amy's question. And if I'm not sure other questions aren't coming through for some reason, I'm going to just send me a text. My email, my phone number is in every email anyway, so feel free to text me your question as well if they're not seeming to be working. Can you see, is it coming through in the chat? No, did my phone number come through in the chat? Okay, so just text me your question. So communicating with volunteers versus employees. This is great. I think employees definitely need more consistent communication, and they should also be afforded more insight into what's going on, what's happening. So for example, one company I'm working with that has a situation just like this, they are telling, like the CEO, COO, CFO, the directors, other VPs, when they meet, they tell every employee, we're meeting, here's our agenda today. They don't necessarily tell the outcome or what the minutia of that was, but they're communicating that. For volunteers, they're giving regular weekly updates. And in fact, I think they've done one or two that are special for the volunteers, but otherwise they're treating them like part of the audience. Now, I want to talk about another piece that I have not included in here. And this is about the people that are giving you a hard time right now. So I was talking to a few different organizations this week, and all the customer service people talked about how people are calling up and chastising them because they haven't done this or done that. And Scott, I see your question. They feel, the customer service people feel like this, like every customer thinks the sky is falling. I'm going to tell you something that you might find controversial. Those customers are your dead weight right now. You may not want them as customers going forward. Now, that sounds pretty absolute, but they are not the ones who are going to help you thrive when this is all over. Most of your customers are affording you a bit of good faith, right? So the ones that are giving you the hard time, they're dead weight, and I would say treat them as such. So those are the two things. Like, so for example, even if you have, so back to the question of volunteers. If you have volunteers who are demanding of you right now, say to them, I'm sorry, we can't have a relationship right now. This may hurt you, and they might even become a bit of a customer terrorist where they spout out about how bad your company is. But people will understand that if they were giving you a hard time during this crisis, they aren't good people. The question from Scott was, what is the balance between reaching out to a customer to see how they're doing, offering support, etc., and opening a hornet's nest of angry complaints? No one likes insurance in the first place. Man, so I am not intimately familiar with insurance, but I think as somebody who is there for them when the worst happens, and you're the broker, right? You're not the insurance company. There could be a message there that has something akin to like, we hope to never hear from you, right? But we want to let you know that we are here, and here's what we're doing to protect your interests going forward. You could actually be very frank. We know nobody likes insurance companies. And you could actually even share, here's a sample of a few of the things we've gotten over the past year, like the hate email or whatnot, some of the more funny ones. Just to disarm, because again, people want to shop local because they want to know you're a human being. Right? This is where insurance brokerages are really going to win, is by putting that face on. And actually, this insurance company, I hope you don't mind, Scott, I'm going to give you a shout out, but Broker Force, their website is great. I love it. It shows real people doing insurance. It's so, like, the insurance companies, think about the insurance companies you see and know. I know there's one with a knight, there's one with a duck. Like, these are not people I know. So insurance brokerages that can really put that face on, and I would be very candid. Remember, pull back the curtain a little bit, Scott. Share with them, and a message like, I know you never want to hear from us, or we hope we never hear from you, would be great. Our clients disseminate press releases through us, private and public companies. We have sent email communication on how they can leverage our service for free. If they're doing something specifically re-COVID-19, I find I'm not getting prospects. Oh, that's not a touch screen. I'm such a silly goose. Attention, they are using competitive services. They don't want to make changes at this time. I'd like for them to use this time to consider a better alternative. That's great. So this sounds to me, this is a good one. Basically, how can you build a better lead generator is what this question says to me. It sounds to me like you're not addressing your client's problem, because even at free, your solution doesn't sound better to them. So their problem obviously is not cost. Is it something else? What is their problem they're facing right now that might want them to make the switch to you? Are you more personal? Are you available more often? What is their actual problem that would make them want to switch? Because, oh man, it's so sad, as I've been in these shoes too. If you're offering something for free that is still not more attractive than somebody else that they pay for, I pay more for our realty services because I want that level of expertise for somebody who charges that much. I would never use, unlikely I'd use a Mincom or like a brokerage that their selling feature is we charge less commission. Like, I would never list my own home, for example. I don't care if it saves me a lot of money. I feel I'd lose money. So you're probably offering the wrong incentive there. See first half of email before. So I don't see it. I'm sorry. Send me an email with the question. I'll be happy to interplay with you on that via email. But that's a good message for everybody else. There's another one that came in. Okay. How about, do you have recommendations for which types of media may be better for different types of messaging? May be helpful for people with lots of ways to communicate and don't know how to use them effectively. One, start with email. If you have not been curating your email list over the last 3 years, you're feeling it right now. We are coming out of a time where word of mouth marketing did very well for us. We're going to move into a time where we would need to do some active interruption marketing. That is definitely a truth. As an entrepreneur myself, that is something that's top of my mind, is how do I set myself up today to be interrupting people to offer them something of value in the future. So I would say one, always via email. And Gita, is it Gita? Is it soft G or hard G? I still don't know. How do I get their attention to understand their pain point? Okay, so, back to the question about best method. Email, 99% of the time. The key to other social channels is you need to take that message from your email and customize it for each social platform. So for example, the way you speak on Instagram will be different than the way you speak on LinkedIn. For example, there's probably not anybody in this webinar, but I know people that swearing is part of the culture for their business, but they don't swear on LinkedIn because it's a very business community. More casual on Instagram. On Facebook, you have a few more words, but basically your email is where you should take all of your cues from. So whatever's in your email, pump out the same message online. And then in between, do little vignettes in between your emails, so once a week emails, maybe 3 times a week right now, do little vignettes on maybe a volunteer profile, on something on your website that's really helpful. So back to the question, how do I get their attention to understand their pain point? That is a great question. There's a few different ways you can do it. Obviously, you can do some of your own research. You can do, I personally help clients go through StoryBrand, storybrand.com. I'm a facilitator and coach for that, and I find it really helps people understand their client. I know a few of you on this webinar have gone through it. And you really want to be asking yourself, you want to be putting yourself in your potential client's shoes and speaking directly to them. That, Harji, Gita, thank you. To understand their pain point, that is really the bottom line of it, is you need to be able to figure out a way to understand their physical, emotional, and philosophical problem. And again, StoryBrand is a 6-hour workshop. It's pretty intensive to help you understand those answers. But again, like if you were the potential client, what potential pain points would you be having? And without being more intimately familiar with your business, it's harder for me to give an exact response, but I'm not sure this format is actually the appropriate place for that either. So I'll just check. Maybe I'll check the email to see if anybody else sent an email in. Yeah, I'm sorry. Also, I had my email was not sending out today, man. One of those days. And yesterday at 2 o'clock when I was going to go test this, our whole internet went down. And I was like, oh man, am I going to have to try to leech off my neighbor? I know my neighbor Ken is on this. I think he's on my driveway watching live. Hi, Ken. But yeah. So anyhow, listen, it's 2:55. Thank you so much. I'm doing these weekly. Next week, I might change it. Next week, I was going to talk about empathy and how you can actually grow it, because I believe here's what's going to happen out of this. A lot of the time I dealt with companies, one of the issues we dealt with was trust. And often the idea of working at home or working remotely was not at the center, but definitely in orbit around that issue. One of the reasons companies often told employees they can't work at home was, oh, we need to see you face to face, we can't do it, you're not as productive. Well, guess what we're proving? You are productive, you can do it from home, you can actually be more productive. So the key though to working at home is you need huge amounts of trust and empathy in different ways. So I was going to do a workshop next week on how you can start building that empathy today to prepare for the coming change in culture. And even if your business doesn't change in the next 1, 2, 3 years, the new people who will be coming to work for you, millennials are now the largest sector in the workforce today. They expect people to work from home. So I was thinking of doing that, but I was also thinking of doing one around like a deeper dive on the transparency in the supply chain, because I think that also will be so huge going forward. One area I think is going to suffer huge are the, what are they called? Those websites where you can somebody will show you a prototype and you can pay money to be an early subscriber. So yeah. So anyhow, everybody, thank you so much. Please subscribe to my podcast, and I will talk to you again in the future. Have a great week. Stay safe and healthy, everybody.